Can you give us a thumbs up if you can hear? Nope. Brian, can you hear us? Darcy, can you hear us? Darcy, can you hear us? Darcy, can you hear us now? Brian?
Brian, can you, I got a little too close. Can you all hear this coming through the Zoom? No. Well, he's still hearing it through the laptop, I think.
Hear it through the laptop, but then we can use the microphone to hear him, so the audience can hear him. If you use
I can hear it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna have to do until, well, I'm hoping that maybe we can. Turn the volume on? Yeah, let's do that. Oh, it's all, yeah.
We are restarting the Zoom to folks that are already online.
Yeah, just gonna leave.
We're figuring out some audio visual issues, sign up times, but see if we can get started as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your patience with our IT technical issues here. I'm Erica Palmer, Planning Manager. This is our CAC meeting number 12. I think it would be great if we could just go around the room, just to have a quick introductions of ourselves. And this was it is still a hybrid meeting, even though they're all on the laptop up there. But one of our committee members is actually joining us online. So with that, let's just start going around the room.
My name is Brian Dorsey, 16-and-a-half-year resident of Sherwood, and I'm here with my board and also
Gene Simpson. We're gonna make you do math to figure out how long I've been here, which is 24 years, and I am the chair of the Planning Commission.
Doug Scott, been assured 15 years. I'm on the city council.
Joe Dills with the project team.
Kate Rogers, also with the project team.
Kennedy Hawkins, been in.
You don't have to be close to it.
Extra microphones off them until you're ready to use it.
Hi, I'm Kennedy. Hey, Kennedy Hawkins, been in. Hi. Kennedy Hawkins, been a member of this community for 27 years, was on the first CAC committee, and now obviously on the second.
Tamara First, I have been a member of the community for almost 13 years. Enjoyed this process.
Emily Campbell, I've been in Sherwood for 22 years, and I'm a community member.
Conrad Sproul, I live on Elwart Road, Sherwood resident for 30 years.
Michael Black, community member, been here 21 years.
And then we have Brian. Can you just introduce your Brian? Great. So welcome everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and he is going to introduce a new project team member.
This is for public comment.
Yep.
In just a moment. But a sort of project team note. We're joined tonight by a little tiny square, but smiling face on the computer there, Darcy Brodzinski. Darcy is a member of the project team, a principal with our firm at MIG. She will be finishing the meetings coming ahead in a couple of weeks. I will be retired. And so Darcy is stepping in, and of course we have the full continuity of Kate and the rest of the team to be tracking.
Congratulations. Right.
Oh, yep. Great. So moving on to public comment, I have two folks that have signed up to give public comment online virtually, Jeffrey Kleinman and Chris Clemau. And then Brian Fields had also signed up for public comment. And then after they speak, they have 3 minutes for public comment. I just want to, if anybody else in the audience wishes to participate in the public comment. So with that, Jeffrey?
This is Jeff Kleinman. My address is 1207 Southwest 6th Avenue, Portland 97204. I'm the attorney representing the Eastview Road Neighborhood Association. With me, electronically at least, this evening is Chris Clemau, who is the traffic engineer for the association, and he'll be speaking after me. And Brian Fields, who has signed up to testify and has also submitted electronic testimony by email, is a member of the association and a resident on Eastview Road. And I don't know whether to direct this initial question to Eric or Erica. Congratulations to everybody on their promotions, by the way. I attended the CAC meeting this afternoon, and one of the consultants stated that on the maps that we have been looking at for the concept plan, the connector over Eastview Road has been removed, which is a major concern of my clients. But it would be looked at in future for consideration of concepts. I wasn't quite sure what was being addressed, what that referred to. So could someone explain that to my clients and me?
So, okay, we can cover that later in the meeting, Jeff.
Okay.
Okay.
Is my volume adequate, by the way? It is. Thank you. Thank you, Doris. The concerns are the same ones that I have addressed before and addressed to the CAC this afternoon. Putting a line on Eastview would be extremely damaging to my clients and their property, especially in light of several considerations that we've raised and that Mr. Clement will also talk about. Basically, what's been set out, at least previously, is a road to nowhere. It would be an extraordinarily expensive connection coming up from the south, with the grades that are involved and with the environmental harm to Chicken Creek, which would have to be avoided in the engineering and construction. It's would seem that there would be transportation needs that actually would require that money. So it just makes no sense. And as I've also said, the county's been quite clear that there's not going to be a northbound connection from the northern end of the Eastview Road. They're not going to run anything through farmland to make Eastview Road part of a bypass. So with those things in mind, my clients remain steadfastly opposed. They feel that the placement of a line on the map covering Eastview, whether it's one side of the right-of-way, both sides, or the whole right-of-way, would effect an inverse condemnation of their properties, for which they would look for compensation. With that, and I would add that at the most recent previous meeting, consultants for the city indicated that if this dream or nightmare connector were actually completed, it would pick up a very small volume of traffic. And in terms of the desired diversion of truck traffic off of Highway 99 going into town and onto Elwood, that simply did not happen if this connector were built. So with that, appreciate the time again, and we'll hand over to Mr. Clement.
Sounds good. Chris?
Yes, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Hello? Okay. Yes, my name is Chris Clement. My business address is 2237 Northwest Torrey Pines Drive, Bend, Oregon 97703. I'm a transportation engineer that has been retained by the Eastview neighborhood. And I mean, I'll just reiterate a bit. I don't want to waste time here, but I reiterate a lot of the materials that Jeff has presented. The neighborhood is generally concerned with the north-south connector as it's currently being contemplated. The majority of the transportation analysis contained or performed by DTS shows that that a roadway in that location is not really intended to carry much traffic in the future. I mean, if you even look within their report, you'll find that the volumes on that road in 2040 is rather low. In fact, they have it down at 4,000 ADT, which is substantially less than, say, Elwood or primarily Elwood, which is the other north-south roadway. I mean, this connector, any sort of roadway there is on the western edge of what would be the UGB and any of the residential development. And it's really only going to pick up, more local residential traffic that's ultimately traveling to the east or from the east to the west versus traffic traveling north-south. And in fact, almost all the roadways in here, carry traffic east-west. So one of the, concerns here is how much emphasis, at least in the past, has been placed on developing a north-south connector. And this, particularly we feel is misplaced along Eastview Road. I mean, some level of roadway is necessary for the local residential traffic, but a roadway, a higher order roadway carrying any sort of north-south traffic is necessary. And, one of the further things that hasn't been explored here is the cost to construct that roadway, particularly in the southern end with topography and environmental challenges. So that, primarily that's the client's concern, and that, that it really, this road shouldn't be given, I guess, a lot of emphasis, and really the focus should be on Elwood and moving traffic east-west. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it.
The next person who signed up for testimony is Brian Fields. You want to come right over here and kind of speak into this microphone so everyone can hear you? Sorry. Yeah.
Members of the CAC, thank you for your time. My name is Brian Fields, community member for 24 years. I'm speaking on behalf of the Eastview Road Neighborhood Association. First off, I would like to state our opposition to the north-south connector. But today, I'd like to discuss the past, the ask, the present, and the future. The past. In 2017, the City Council decided to withdraw the request of Metro to bring in the 1,200 acres of Sherwood West into the urban growth boundary. Many of you were likely present at that City Council meeting. I know I was. The meeting was packed. The residents of Sherwood testified about how traffic was overwhelming and that they were opposed to the expansion of the urban growth boundary until concrete steps had been taken to address the flow of traffic in the area. I encourage each of you to ask yourself, were the residents who rallied against expansion worried that Elwood Road was not pretty enough? The answer is no. The residents were concerned about the impact of heavy traffic. Once the Sherwood West revisit is complete and before development can occur, there will need to be an ask of Metro by the City Council to bring reserve land into the UGB. I urge that the scope of this ask be supported by our current transportation infrastructure. Think long and hard about how receptive area residents who objected to bringing 1,200 acres into the UGB will be if all the revised plan offers are conceptual future infrastructure improvements. This brings me to the present. Currently, the plan offers one option, an Elwood Road realignment with a conceptual north-south bypass. The CAC has presented some pretty mock-ups of the realignment, but provided no mock-up of Elwood in its existing alignment, improved with expanded capacity, sidewalks, bike paths, landscaping, and design elements to remediate the sound and sight impacts of a busy road. Sure, you've had survey respondents which liked the concept of Elwood being a pretty neighborhood street. But survey respondents never saw, lost my place, mock-ups of what Elwood could be if improved in its current alignment. Ask yourself how confident you can be that the survey responses are representative in any way of how Sherwood residents will respond when asked, when they realize that the City Council is deciding on a 1,200-acre urban growth boundary expansion. This brings me to the future, which again touches on the ask. Obviously, the Sherwood West Plan Revisit is going to provide much of the context for discussions about the expansion of the urban growth boundary. But I urge you all on the CAC to be realistic about how much weight pretty pictures of Elwood and a hypothetical bypass will factor into the public and the council's opinion when deciding on the scope of the UGB ask. I know that most people will be thinking about the present and how viable and how soon any future transportation improvements can be built. Thank you for your time.
I just want to note that 3 additional pieces of testimony came in, and those were all emailed to the CAC yesterday for their review. That testimony came from Brian Fields, Pete LaRocca, and Dennis Christian. And Brian Fields was the last person to sign up for testimony, but since we have quite a few people here, is there anybody else in the audience who would like to have a few words?
My name is I've been in Sherwood for 37 years, and I guess I'm the bad guy who started this resistance to development. But I want to first thank the people on the City Council for their hard work in trying to solve a problem, and we realize it is a problem that we all have to deal with. We're really concerned with the safety since we lost 2 girls on already this year in being hit by cars. I'm really concerned with the traffic increase. It's bad enough already. Of course, I'm older than dirt, but it's when you drive from Quail Run Lane, where I live, and you go on to Southwest Eastview Road, you have to look both ways very carefully because I've been hit almost 3 times this week already with the amount of traffic, which is very, very low. But it's exceedingly difficult to see the traffic. And I'll just leave it at that. But I wanted you to know that I'm sort of the pack rat, along with my wife, who started the Eastview organization to really fight this development, because we don't really think it's the right way to go. And we really are interested in the wildlife that would be, of which we have plenty to deal with. I have at least 50 quail that come in every afternoon that I feed and have fed for 30 years. I don't want them to be martyred in the process as well. I'll just shut up after that. Thank you for being kind enough to listen to an old gopher.
Oh, one more hand came up.
Okay, I'll be quick. I also like to thank the council members because I know this is a challenge to deal with planning. My name is Linda Grass. I've been a resident on Eastview Road for 20 years and love our neighborhood. It is beautiful. I happen to live on the west side, which is in the rural reserve and not part of the potential urban growth. But my heart just is sick because I look at our neighborhood, which is so beautiful and so peaceful, and it feels like we will be a sacrificial lamb for very, very little benefit in my mind, because the stretch of the bypass is so short. And and because of the topography and the steep incline of the road, I can't imagine that many people would take that north-south connector. So I sincerely hope that we can find a better option, because I think as a Sherwood resident, we all pride in having a beautiful kind of small town feel. And our little neighborhood is definitely that. So thank you. Thank you all.
I don't see any more hands. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Joe and Kate.
Does it help if I use this? Can you hear better? Okay. So the first agenda item is to walk through the evolution of the plan since your last couple of meetings where you looked at alternatives, talked about specific issues. Kate is going to go through those elements in a moment. I thought I would just introduce this by sort of going back to the beginning and summarizing what a concept plan is and what it isn't. The concept plan in total, with the map being kind of the first total picture of it, is the first of many steps that the city will go through. And we've made diagrams. You've probably seen those online and heard the presentations. But the UGB ask, and then comprehensive planning that gets more specific, that includes an amendment to the city's transportation system plan, where the traffic analysis gets more refined, more real, and so on. All of those steps play out over the coming years. The other thing to note is that it's very long range in its nature. You can take your guess at how much development per year would happen and how long this area would take to build out. We think it's on the order of about 30 years or more, depending on business cycles and such. And emphasis on the conceptual long-range nature of that. So not only that much time, but for the concept plan, the land uses are fuzzy, they're not site-specific, the roads are dashed, all of those kinds of things to indicate that it's a concept. And then finally, this is advisory. This is sort of back to the job of the committee here. It's advisory up to the city council ultimately, and with a stop at the planning commission, I imagine. So what the concept plan is that it's not a land use regulation. And that's an important distinction because those have pretty specific legal meanings. It's the prelude, should this all play out over time, to the city adopting land use regulations to implement. But it's not a land use regulation, and it's certainly not the level of detail that goes along with that. So with that framing, I'm going to turn it over to Kate, and we can take you through some of the highlights that we want the committee to talk about tonight.
Thanks, Joe. So we're going to talk about land use first, and I think our hope with this meeting is to come away with kind of a final checklist of refinements to make to this map and the set of maps to finalize the concept plan maps and move them into the concept plan kind of drafting phase. So we kind of want confirmation from the CAC that this is, we're headed in the right direction. This is the right direction, and if there are some sort of final adjustments or tweaks to make, we want to take note of all of those so we can make those changes. And just to kind of remind everyone of the last step that led to where we are now, we took a look at the three land use alternative maps at the last CAC meeting in November. And we had a little voting exercise, and you all weighed in on which alternative you liked best for within each sub-district. So we have the north, far west, west, and southwest. And the results of that exercise and kind of the decisions that came out of that were we liked the alternative 1 for the north and far west areas, and alternative 2 for the west and the southwest areas. So this map reflects kind of mashing those two pieces together of those two maps. And that led us to a kind of consolidated map here. And just to kind of remind you all of what the sort of themes of those land use concepts are. In the North District, that's really the employment focus of this area. So you'll see most of the area is designated as mixed employment. There's a mix of housing types in the sort of southern area, kind of clustered around Elbert Road. A community park, and we'll talk a little bit more about community parks in just a minute. But this version shows it on Edie Road, just south of Chicken Creek. And then at the last meeting, we talked about maybe adding a residential buffer area at the northwest corner of the employment area, and we also want to talk about that in just a minute. But that's kind of the theme of the north. Far west is really the lowest density area. This is the Eastview Road neighborhood and other existing kind of rural residential areas. There's also quite a bit of topography, as you know, in that area. So mostly low density neighborhood with a small kind of pocket of cottage cluster and medium density just in the northeast corner. And then moving down to the West District, we have another potential community park location in what we've been calling the Sand Trap kind of bulb-shaped area near Chicken Creek. And then again, low-density housing along the ridgeline at the western end. And then to the north and west of the high school, a mix of different housing types from multifamily to medium, middle, some cottage cluster. And then really the Kruger Road kind of corridor has become kind of a focus area where we're seeing some potential mixed use, commercial and residential uses clustered there, some higher density multifamily housing, and other mix of housing types. And then moving south, again, kind of carrying forward the idea of a mix of housing types and densities, and then this hospitality designation concept at the southern end of the concept plan area. So this is the sort of gateway to wine country. The idea is a sort of destination hotel, winery, wine-themed businesses, restaurants, other things that make this kind of a potential tourist designation or destination, excuse me. So that's where we are with a kind of combined map. I do want to mention that we made a couple of, when we put all of the pieces together of the different alternatives, we noticed that the balance of housing types and quantities was a little bit off from where we kind of initially were assuming and targeting. So we made a couple of refinements to kind of get closer to sort of earlier assumptions and kind of get closer to the alternative one. So there, in particular, we noticed there was a lot of the middle housing designation, and so we made a couple of choices to reduce some of those areas and replace them with mostly medium density neighborhood housing, and also making sure the multifamily target was kind of where we were thinking that would be. And so you'll see some of those, they're mostly pretty small changes on the map. They're not kind of changing the emphasis or the overall concept. I did want to bring up this idea of a residential buffer at the northwest corner of kind of, the idea was, and this was something that we heard from the CAC kind of in response to community comments about concerns of having employment designation right next to kind of rural residential farm area. And at the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee meeting earlier today, there were some comments about that actually employment, kind of mixed employment landowners might actually be a pretty good neighbor to sort of low density farm uses. And they suggested that, you could require a large, landscaped buffer area and create separation of those uses. And that actually might be more kind of compatible with an adjacent farm than, say, middle housing of townhomes or things like that. And also,
can you use the cursor to just point geographically where you're referring to right there?
I guess I can. Yeah, so we're talking about this area up here. And also they pointed out that this little pocket of housing is kind of isolated up in that northwest corner and it's not connected to Elward. It might not make a ton of sense in that spot. So we wanted to bring that back to this group and see if you had thoughts about that and maybe wanted to rethink it.
Let's pause right there. Take it one issue at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of the thing that the TAC said, but as I was looking at the maps for tonight, I had the same thought about the isolation. But there's no retail, there's no commercial, there's nothing near there. And they're just kind of on an island out, that housing pocket would be on an island out there by itself, which doesn't seem ideal at all. But hearing the buffering thing, I think maybe makes sense to backtrack that.
It was responsive to the comment we got, but now that we see it on the map, a few questions. Any other kind of thoughts on that area? The practical question is, do you think it should be purple or should it be residential as drawn? Sure, yeah. A little louder, please, sorry. Yeah, right.
West of Elward, yeah.
Kind of up the hill as you're getting towards the Christmas trees. The proposal we'd put on the table for you to consider would be that the mixed employment designation, the purple, as I've been calling it, would just fill out to the west boundary there.
And is the west boundary actually Laveau?
So that LeBeau is the north boundary.
It's the north-
Still
yeah,
Sherwood
yeah.
becomes LeBeau, and then it's not a road there as the boundary. It's just a
It's a
property
property line. Yeah.
I think I would add to the work program for the city staff is to ensure that we put in our code a buffering tool so that when this came in to develop, any properties adjacent to ideas outside the urban road boundary or the urban reserve area have double setbacks or some other tool to ensure that buffering does occur. So we need to get it in our code.
Right.
More than just the standard buffering that we
Correct.
normally have.
Right, or buffering with the farmland surrounding, even if it's, the housing that we're gonna be buffering, we should encourage an extra separation between urban reserve and rural reserve.
Right.
When the urban reserve comes in, ensure that that buffering stays there. We got a 50-year plan that it's gonna be a rural feature. If you ever drive in some of those areas where you've got apartment and farmland, it looks awkward. And if we get our code updated to ensure the buffering transition is logical.
Any other comments around the table, committee members, for, do a little,
You have to, if you're buffering from to the farmland, and then if you're turning that to be residential, you're also gonna buffer between the residential and the commercial, you're limiting what can be done there anyway. The more buffer you add, obviously, that's less use for housing anyways, so.
okay. All right. So let's do this with a straw poll kind of, raise your hand if you support this idea that we've generated together here, that we would color it mixed employment, and there'd be direction in the concept plan report to work on buffering standards. Hand up if you, okay, looks like committee members, Kennedy? No opinion, okay. Okay, so that goes on our list, we'll make that change. Where do you want to go next?
Great.
Community park?
Yeah, let's talk about parks. So when we kind of put the maps together, we took kind of a closer look at where some of the potential land use concepts were landing. And one of those was one of the locations for the community park. So there was general agreement that kind of sand trap area in the west portion of the concept plan area, that was all of the alternatives placed a community park in that spot. But there was more variation with the alternatives for the second community park. So alternative one, which is what we kind of move forward with for the concept plan map, draft concept plan map, placed the community park on Edie Road in this kind of pocket southeast.
Go ahead and use the cursor so we can point out each one.
You can't see my finger? Yeah, this one. So option A. So that's the way the map is kind of showing it right now. But as a project team, we kind of came together and we're taking a look and thinking about the sort of the best use of that site and what we've heard from community members. And we've heard from property owners in that area that they're really interested in residential development. And also, this is one of the areas that's really kind of primed for earlier phase development because there's existing infrastructure. It's right adjacent to already developed residential neighborhoods. So we thought about, okay, well, what if we kind of made a swap and showed medium density neighborhood designation in that area. So looking at option B, we swapped the park with an area that was medium density in option A, and in terms of kind of total acreage, those two areas add up to about the same amount of net acres. So it's kind of a one-for-one swap in terms of housing park area. And this option, and I think, received a decent amount of support from the TAC just for this group's information. But there were some, we'll talk about some of their kind of concerns about potential impacts of park location and other considerations. And then option C was another one that we looked at because, and this one is a site on Roy Rogers Road that the city recently acquired. And the city doesn't have any specific plans for that property yet, but because the city already owns it and this general area was initially shown as a community park location in the preliminary concept plan back in 2016. So we thought we should consider that spot as well. The key trade-off with that particular location is it's a decent chunk. It's 20 net acres of employment land that would be, taken out and wouldn't necessarily be swapped anywhere else in the plan area. So really, we would lose about 20 acres of employment land, which we calculated to be about 360 to 370 jobs with our very rough estimate. So you're potentially losing jobs in that area, which, as we know, has been a big focus of this plan to kind of maximize employment opportunities, especially in this northern area, which has decent access to transportation and might also have potential for other infrastructure access. So, but some other considerations that the TAC brought up were, how well connected are these locations to not just road access, but also sort of multimodal, bike, walk access. And, not just thinking of it from the Sherwood West perspective, but the larger city. These are community parks. They should serve the larger city. They should be accessible to folks throughout the community. And also just their location, just one more point, yeah. Their location, actually all of these parks are kind of pretty close to natural resource areas, either the Chicken Creek area or other natural areas. So thinking about a community park, which is envisioned as a more developed, lighted, might have ball fields and other kind of active sport-related uses. Just thinking about where those uses make sense in relation to more natural habitat areas. So those were kind of the discussions we had earlier today. How do we want to do this? Okay.
Let's start with Jean.
So we're looking at this in a vacuum. When we don't look at what's right across the road. So right across the road, we have schools and.
In B.
What?
In B.
In real life.
Elementary school.
In real life.
Yeah.
Just
From where?
From which option?
Oh, from
From option B. That's what I was referring to. Is that
no, option A.
So this is option A.
A? I'm sorry, I was saying the wrong. Yes, there are
The
schools.
schools are down.
Go ahead with your point. I'm sorry.
My point is there's a park here.
Yeah.
But we're, I guess, trying to solve a problem because we already have shovel-ready areas to build housing right now. Are we trying to put another park when we have a park, a little park here, we have a little park here, we have a big park here, we have a couple other little parks here. We have existing schools and park features over here. Are we solving a problem that doesn't need to be solved by putting a park potentially right where there's already engagement areas across? So I'm just throwing it out there to say we need to look just outside the boundary to say, we have a school system, a park system, and another.
So good question. We should probably set the premise here correctly, is that the idea is that there would be 2 community parks. The starting point was that there would be 2 community parks in Sherwood West.
Okay.
You can revise that if you'd like, but strong support for the sand trap. And then where is the second one? Acreage-wise, whether it's A or B or C option here, it's intended as a community park level of land. 15 to 20 acres is what these choices are. So it's got ball fields, it's got the kind of programming that would be, so it's larger on the spectrum as opposed to the stars, which are neighborhood parks. And what goes on at the schools is a little specialized.
Because moving a community park that is accessible to the community right there and then putting it across where the employment areas, we're not creating a community accessible versus putting a second community park down next to our tourist area.
Yeah.
What the tourist destination area and swapping some of the housing that's down there. I'm just saying, I don't need to keep it up in this one block. I want to when we look at this vision and pull back and say what's right around this area, and if we're just moving it because we're only looking at this one square and we're going to this part's over here, we're putting a community park buried in our employment area versus thinking, well, we already have opportunities over here, and what is missing in the southern,
Right, okay.
very southern part.
Okay, all right, good thought. Let's,
I may be way off here, but did I just hear you say something about where it is in option A, that it would be set up equivalent to like ball fields and soccer fields and what we already have at the regions?
So that is,
Did I hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, so where,
Yeah.
in fact, what I've heard, where I'm going with this is, and we need more school space, right? And the fields at the ridges are always a swamp. So what if we left it there, made that the ball fields for the schools, and expanded the school on the property that the school's already on, instead of trying to find different property for another school?
I think that's beyond the scope of the
Yeah.
concept plan.
right. Yeah, I mean, that option would be, don't do a second community park here.
In the southern
Yeah,
Sherwood.
yeah.
Well, no, it would be where it is in option A right now, and using that to replace the ball fields that are at the ridges.
Oh, I get it.
Across the ridges.
Yeah, okay, now I'm
And then
tracking.
use the swampy fields at the ridges to expand school space, because we talked about needing more school space.
It is beyond our scope in the sense that we can't kind of mess around with the school lands there.
I like the idea.
It's, yeah, it's,
But
There was a reason that I did have a park down in the southern area, and we took it out. I think there was it's not feasible kind of comment there.
right, there's two small parks down there.
yeah.
yeah, that was in this kind of
The
area. near
slopes are
near
not
the creek
really
down here.
conducive to the amount of land you need.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I've said from day one, I don't even know that 2 community parks is financially feasible anyway, but I think if we're gonna dream, let's dream, but, going back to the options, I kind of agree with Gene, like, putting it where A is, you're taking away the opportunity to build immediately with places that's ready to build residential, but also it has become kind of redundant with the school that you have right across the road. C, I just think is a non-starter. I don't even think that would go anywhere past this committee, so it's kind of a waste of time.
Because jobs being a priority?
Yes.
Okay.
B, I think then you become, isn't that just really close to where we have the other community park? It seems like we're taking 2 community parks practically next to each other, which seems kind of a lost opportunity.
They're about a mile away. Let's go back to the full map.
So, can I ask a question?
Okay,
Yeah.
I guess that's what we're saying.
We've got a little park right over here. What if we need that also, the larger park, and connect those two together? One gym park with the 2 separate. Does that make sense?
So do part of the community park concept on the north side of Chicken Creek.
I see.
South of Edie.
Well,
Right.
And just.
The DSL permits to cross a creek.
In what way? I mean,
If you want it, you couldn't. Connecting these would be.
you couldn't connect them with a footpath or.
Yeah, within the permitting world, it's plausible that, foot access across the creek would work, and you
Yes,
you just
not car
program
connection.
two sides.
I mean, we have to get foot connections across the creek, or we're losing
Right.
so much of the advantage of
Right.
having this.
I thought you were connecting
Not by
road.
car, no.
Yeah, I thought. There's a.
Yeah, we'll have one just adjacent over there anyway.
Yeah.
I think we have a little park.
But if we made that one bigger over here.
When we first started this whole thing, the sand trap was like really, I feel like it was a lot larger. Like we were kind of like, this is big, and it's I think maybe in my mind at least it was this kind of large thing, and it is still obviously substantial. But then this land that we're talking about not being a park appears to be even larger, than what we've got with the sand trap. So I'd hate to lose that, even though I mean it's perfectly flat. It's obviously totally really ready for whatever it's going to be, but I'd hate to lose that much space.
Okay, let's see if we can start to narrow it. Through these comments, I'm hearing not A, not B, and not C. Interest in kind of either south, if you, but it's not flat, or a new idea north of Chicken Creek.
Build a high school on that land, but land is slipping out there. You can build a park on the land that's slipping out there.
Yeah.
What's the objection to B?
It's disconnected and small. I would
It's at least 10 acres. It would meet the minimum. I'm going from memory, flat in that area. I forget the name of the road. It's a 4-syllable name to the road.
I'm okay with B.
I like B.
And I'm saying that because you got multifamily right there. A lot of folks in multifamily, if they don't drive a lot, for them to have a place where they can take their kids, then be trapped there with no park and have to worry about crossing roads to get to parks. I think it'll serve that little community there nicely and make them feel a part of Sherwood West and not so much an outsider.
It would provide an amenity to the area.
Yeah, providing an amenity
Yeah,
to
but
the
also,
area.
I mean, community parks are meant to draw people in, so you have good, it's gonna have good transportation access to you as well, and also it's amenity to whatever that employment area becomes, right, which is also attractive to the employers, right, that people like to go walks on their lunch or after work and those kind of things. And also, I think it can also be connected up through the trail system to the creek, down there. I like B the best of the three.
Other comments, or let's take yours.
Well, to say it, where it currently is on option A is being turned into housing as well, then we're talking about footbridge over the creek, you could just connect where it currently is on A to where it is on B, and bring in all the housing there as well as all the housing that's already being shown around it.
Yeah.
So you can
The other thing about B, all of these have this to a certain degree, but it's next to natural resource land. And so your ball fields have this backdrop of where the forest is, and it's like Cook Park in that sense, which is great. It makes it feel bigger. Okay, let's go around the table. Thoughts on B? It's comments, opinions? Can you live with it? I want to see if we can get to a little closure. Sorry?
I don't know the exact number, but I think it's around 10 to 15. A and B are actually very similar. I think A, it looks larger, but really some of that is natural resource area that you would have to kind of factor out of the total acreage. Although it'd make the park feel bigger, but.
And all of these are kind of plus minus, so I wouldn't.
What I'd actually done before I came to the meeting was drew a line across that area and said, develop something here. I had actually thought mixed use commercial or something developable there, and leaving the top half next to the creek parkland. And so if you're lose 10 acres in the B option, instead of losing all 20 acres, lose 10 of it and move it over to where you have your red circle.
I'm not sure I tracked with all of that idea.
Move this much of the green from here and leave half of the green. We're not losing it all.
Right, okay. Pretty sure it's below the threshold we're looking for a community park at that point.
I think she's saying to have a park that's split in half.
So I would say keep the community park that you're talking about on B.
And half of A combined.
But
Half of A.
I'm saying don't lose all of the green space. You have a little tiny park. I just want to make sure that I don't want to replace all of the.
I think it's a lot bigger than you think.
Well, it's 20 acres. I don't want to take a 20-acre green space and replace it with 20 acres of houses. That blows up our numbers for housing to jobs ratios.
Yeah, but then you're
So
taking
A,
out of the other.
Right.
the metrics for A and B were almost the same. So, yeah.
I would suggest low density.
Low density, not medium.
What's across the street? Low density residential.
Fits our medium category. Yeah,
Medium under pre-HB 2000.
okay.
I mean, I kind of take all the density
Now,
zoning for a grain of salt at this
Okay, so I'm hearing two ideas. One is go with B, but the hybrid of that would be B plus the north half of A,
Right, so that we,
which is sort of, would make it kind of a very large neighborhood scale park. If memory serves, that's where the existing home is. That
no, the creek.
Oh, it'd have to cross Elward.
Yeah, there's no way around it.
Oh.
If you're gonna connect the parks, then the sand trap.
And also looking at the map, to your point, I mean, they're looking at a real map, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
They are pretty similar sizes. Like, I think, I don't know what it is about drawing, but it does make it look like it's much smaller, but it doesn't look that much smaller to me. It looks pretty similar.
Yeah.
So are we pretty comfortable with B?
Yeah, I take B by default. I don't want to give up the employment area on C. Don't want to give up the housing on A. B is the best alternative. That's the three in my opinion.
Okay. Any other last thoughts on that?
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't love B. I mean, I just don't love it. That's all. I mean, it's adjacent to commercial and, I don't know. It's just, yeah.
So that's actually multifamily. It's all housing in that area.
Well, except for purple.
Oh, yes. That's mixed employment, right?
It's mixed employment. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that Joe and I were talking about was when we depict this on the final maps, because I mean these are just concepts. This will not translate into a parks designation once this moves into comprehensive planning stage. That won't necessarily get depicted as designated parkland if the city doesn't control that land. So we talked about maybe showing an underlying land use of some housing, maybe medium density housing, and then having kind of a green hatched overlay on top of that to indicate this would be a good location for a park, but we're not necessarily like designating that area as the park.
Oh. So.
Did we open a can of worms?
The city to acquire the land.
But Southeast Sherwood Master Plan.
Yeah,
Hey.
we need, that's a whole different thing.
Can I ask you a question?
You want more certainty than that.
Yes, if you want a park, you designate it a park. Otherwise, you don't get a park.
Can I ask a question about the current status of that land? It's already been, it's sold, basically. It's sold for residential. Or, it's sold to a developer of some sort. It's been pending for about 3 years, I think.
Which one are you talking about?
A.
Oh.
On ED Road.
So, what is the chance that they can annex in and do what they, I guess I'm trying to figure out the potential for them to do something without, before any of this gets solidified.
You can't.
It's
No.
not in the urban growth boundaries.
It's all those steps down the road
I gotcha.
that we talked about. Yeah. Okay, I feel like we still have two ideas on the table. We've got the go with B or B plus an edit to A. Not married to that?
Oh, no, I take a poll of the committee. I don't either.
Let's do just a couple
All right,
straw
what do
polls.
you
and-
think?
Well,
I like B.
yeah.
There you go.
All right, let's continue around the table. You okay with B? Yeah, okay. Any, B, all right. Don't love it, is what we heard later, but have you,
I'm still with A.
still with A, okay.
Hold out. Gotta have those.
Still with A. So we have two A's, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 B's with a footnote.
I'm a compromise girl.
Yeah, okay.
Give him a B and a half an A.
Just in the interest of forward momentum, we'll come away with B, but with all of these ideas, and you still have a couple more meetings if you want to duke it out a little bit more, but, okay,
Sounds great.
all right, B on that.
And then this is the larger parks and open space and trails picture. So, you know, you all have seen this kind of network of sort of local community trails in the dashed lines, and then the regional trail concept along the Chicken Creek Greenway. And, you know, the trail network is really based on, you know, connecting to existing open spaces, potential new open spaces, following, you know, transportation routes, following roads as maybe multi-use paths, or other, you know, gas line corridors, right? Gas easements. And, you know, making sure those connections are made to other key features like the Cedar Creek Trail, the Wildlife Refuge, and things like that. So this concept, minus the community parks, hasn't really changed that much over the course of our work.
Yeah,
So-
but we don't have any questions for you on this tonight. We just wanted to show it as an individual diagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then streets, I mean, this map is pretty similar to the last version that you all looked at, with a pretty notable exception that the north-south connector has been removed from this streets framework, just because it's much more conceptual even than the conceptual streets that we're showing in dashed lines on the map. It requires much more further study. We're going to talk about it a little bit more when we talk about the traffic analysis. And it just doesn't make sense to show a specific location for that connection because there isn't one at this point. Anything else to say about that?
Yes, because the question, a reasonable question was asked in public comment about, well, if you don't show the north-south connector here, what does it mean to have it somewhere else? And Kate just answered that this is the map that we think is getting, at least on a conceptual level, towards where roads would be recommended to be. But we'll show on the next slides, we've captured the north-south connector as a separate diagram and described it in text to say that's an idea that continues to get studied. So that's how we kind of split the difference on those. We have one more little kind of edit or two that we need to think about. We don't have to decide right now, but the how you configure the various legs of Elwert and Edie is more detailed than we really have information to solve right now. But we did remove the leg between, thank you, right there where the cursor is, but we kept the leg of Elwert up there. And really, in fairness, if you're going to do the realignment, you need to take out the Elwert part too, and let's describe that in the narrative. So that's just a little clarification we're going to do on the maps. Okay. All right. That is it we had for checklist questions. Anything else?
Yeah, so we talked about this conceptual diagram at the last meeting, and this is what we came up with. And I did want to check in and see if this kind of meets what you were expecting in terms of showing that super conceptual, study this further, north-south idea without making it too specific. And it's really kind of a graphic design question, really.
So I think silence is good
It gets
enough for now.
the point across well.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah. So, I mean, the real answer is we don't know exactly, and there are lots of options for how, if Elwert is realigned, assuming it is realigned, what to do with that existing right-of-way. There's lots of options in terms of sort of traffic control, cutting off access from one direction, both directions. It's likely that at least some portion of that road will remain for the folks that live there and need to get to their homes. But there will probably be at least some kind of traffic routing to avoid through connections, so that, you know, through traffic goes along the realigned route.
That particular segment, we know that something needs to remain.
Right.
Because you've got developed land on the east side and developable land on the west side, and it's local circulation, the ability to get over to the school, all that needs to still work.
Yeah.
Yet another option. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to point out one other transportation issue that came up at the TAC, that in ODOT's world, the overpass that is at the south end of the project area right there, that there was some analysis and coordination with the city council on and so on. In the ODOT world, they consider that, yes, make the connection, but figure out over time whether an overpass or an underpass is the best solution. And we've characterized it as an overpass to date, because that's how it was written up in the analysis and so on. But the over-under was, I guess, what was called out as kind of the reality of how it'll be determined later. So we'll go to the more over-under language as we move ahead in writing this up. Okay? Kate, unless you've got something else, I think we move on to Carl.
Sounds good.
There he is.
Introduce yourself, Carl. And
Carl Springer with DKS Associates. I was the lead on the transportation analysis. A lot of what we're presenting tonight is kind of a recap of what was presented a couple months ago, but there's a bit of new information that I want to highlight, that's specific to a few more findings and a list of recommendations. Now, this is a highlight of the memo that was distributed with your packet, so it's just kind of a recap of that. So if you've had a chance to look at that, that's what we're talking about right about now. So next slide, please. So we're going to walk through a little bit about how the current set of land use concepts match up well with prior planning for this area. And from a transportation planning point of view, that's significant. That means the scale of the magnitude of the development is similar. And from a traffic point of view, that means the level of impact and the new facilities you need is similar. Now, there's lots of details to be wrinkled out or to be ironed out, but you don't want to wrinkle them out. That sounds weird, doesn't it? But for our purposes, that's an important finding. So let me go through those on the next few slides. So this table should look familiar. This is the sum of households, jobs, and estimated trips for each of the alternatives. If you go from left to right, those are different numbers in terms of housing and jobs, because some have a different mix versus others. But for my purposes, what's important is the bottom line, which is how many vehicle trips are generated plan-wide, not in any one particular area, but if you add up everything across the plan, those are the totals you get. The last column there, that's the Urban Reserve Transportation Study that was done, I think, a couple years ago now. So again, that number of around 6,000 is similar to the other numbers on the list there. To be clear, these are vehicle trips across a 2-hour period. So we call it the PM peak period. That's what those numbers represent. Well, next slide, please. So a bit of new information on this diagram. We didn't have this at our last meeting. So the diagram on the right shows how trips will go in and out of that plan area. So we technical people call this a trip distribution, but it basically means a trip that starts or ends within the plan area. What direction do they want to go to? So if you read the numbers on this, which you may or may not be able to do in this room, but it's in the attachment, it shows you that for trips going in and out of the concept plan area, most of them are going to the north and to the east. So they're going north on Roy Rogers or on 99 or east on Twall and Sherwood. We estimate about 25 or 30% are crossing 99 and going into the rest of Sherwood. That's where they're going. We found that very few trips are wanting to go south on 99 or west into other parts of Washington County. So that's something that we didn't have for you last time. And I think that, to me, that matches up with what I would expect because you're toward the edge of the metro area. So the goods and services that most people want to see on every day is north and east from where we're located here. The next bullet there. Oh, did you have a question, Gene?
Yeah, is this trips generated by this development?
This concept plan, yes.
Concept plan, I'm
So
sorry,
we
yes.
basically said for all the zones that are within the concept plan, where do the trips start and end?
It doesn't factor in existing trips or trips that just started outside of the concept area.
I mean, like through trips?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't represent that. It's just trips that start or end within the concept plan area.
Okay,
So
okay, that makes
for those
sense.
trips that are doing what you're probably thinking of is coming down Roy Rogers, going to Elward and down south, those will still be there to some degree.
But not.
But that's not represented in these numbers. either.
Okay, that's perfect, and that's perfect. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Score one. All right, so let's see. A little clarification. We talked about most of the roads would be either a 3-lane, which means one travel lane in each direction with a center turn lane, or it would be a 2-lane. And so we have a little bit of refinement on that. So clearly, Sherwood Road will be 3-lane when it's time to do that. Elward Road will be 3-lane because it's a county arterial, and that's what they look for. They have a specific cross section that they're looking for. That if you look at the memo, there's some details in there about how large that road is according to county standards. It's a 90-foot right-of-way, so it's a very different road than what you see out there today. Let's see. One clarification was on Edie Road. I think there was a misunderstanding that all of Edie Road would be 3 lanes. What we found is that just the eastern portion, the part from Elbert Road over to 99 needs to be 3 lanes. The western portion on the other side of Chicken Creek can be smaller. So that's an important piece. And then also the same kind of finding down at Chapman Road. I mean, because of the orientation of those trips, we found basically anywhere the plan connects to 99, those connections are all going to be pretty active. So that's what we're representing in that. We already talked about the overcrossing, so you know you've got one coming along. I don't know, has that been committed? The one at Sunset, is that a program project? I think it is. Yeah, the Ped Bridge. Okay. So that's definitely a piece of the mix. The overcrossing or undercrossing. Whatever it is, it's a grade separated facility that doesn't intersect with a highway. It's meant for local travel only. That's what that thing is, just to be clear. And then Joe and Kate already talked about the Elward Road realignment a bit, so that's a piece of what's in this plan. And then North-South Connector we also talked about a bit before I came up. So moving on to the next slide. So let's see, forecasted volumes are similar, we knew that. We know about the orientation being north and east. And then we've got a roster of intersections that need to be upgraded. As this moves to the next stage of evolution, as you get ready to put a comp plan together and get ready to incorporate it into the city, if it gets that far, there'll be more analysis done to better understand the specific improvements throughout that planning area. Because basically, you need to figure out that's an important piece, and we don't have enough detail at this point to do that kind of analysis. Last point is I think that people really hung on to this dimension about the North-South Connector. It does basically operate like a neighborhood road. If you're familiar with what volumes look like on a neighborhood road, that's a typical range on a lot of neighborhood scale roads. So that's just one of the findings.
And what was the northern endpoint of that road?
Well, that road, I mean, that was the concept earlier on before the line got pulled out, where it actually did go all the way from Edie Road down to Chapman.
Yes.
So it used part of Eastview.
To me, this road is nonsensical unless it goes over to Sherwood.
Well, Well, right, I mean, that, you'd have to jump over a number of land use hurdles to make it all the shoals.
Talking like, to me, my concept about this north-south corrector was always that it had to go connect out of Sherwood into, like, the regional transportation network.
I agree.
Otherwise, it makes no sense. And that's what I thought we were talking about all along, so I've been in the dark on this one.
Yeah, to me, this, at best, this would be like a phase one of that kind of a thing. But for it to be used as a regional facility, it had to go a lot further north and a lot further south.
And so this is a local
This makes no
connector.
sense to me. I wouldn't waste my time.
Right.
It's a local connector.
It's a local connector.
Right.
Which isn't necessarily even needed.
Right.
And it goes right through our farm. No one's mentioned it to us.
So there's not a specific location.
Right. Next slide, please. So these recommendations again are in the memo. Pieces that are important to catch on to the design concept for Elmwood Road and 300 Sherwood 527 line. Mentions of that are in the memo. But you basically, Washington County lays out pretty clear standards of what that's going to look like. It's similar to Sunset's kind of a unique street, really. I mean, it was kind of a custom design cross section, but I think the vision is that it's going to be something like Sunset. It'd be that kind of style. That work is yet to be done. So that's a recommendation here. Is you need to do that work to figure out what that is. Work with the county to come up with a cross section that you're comfortable with, and then that'll be programmed into the funding package as well. So. We already talked about further study of the Elmwood Road alignment, which one makes sense, because there's a lot of questions to be answered there. It's not something we can sort out at this stage. Let's see. We talked about the Edie Road upgrade project, the Sherwood upgrade. Edie Road to the west would be just 2-lane collector, and then this other connector. A subject of further discussion in the next iteration of the study. So. I think that's my last slide, right?
Other questions of Carl?
Is there a chance that the Elmwood Edie Road realignment would not be feasible? That they,
like from an engineering point of view?
yeah, that, or
Engineers can do amazing things.
with enough money.
Yeah. Yeah, the question will be whether it's worth it, right? Whether there's a benefit cost, that's of value to the community, exceeds the cost of what you're really having to do there.
So as a concept plan, the road alignments are not set in stone. For like even Elmwood or Edie.
That gets sorted out later in the planning process. And I know it's tough in these kind of things because these are done in very distinct phases. We can only take it so far at this phase, frankly. But yeah, that needs to be sorted out.
Have a wish list and then a reality check.
Yes, correct.
One piece of the reality check is the state and federal permitting.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Just because we think we want to have it doesn't mean it can happen. Or will make sense. Or that it makes sense when we get further along.
Yeah. Other comments, questions on transportation analysis?
I mean, I look at it on the Elmwood realignment. Early on, we talked about, as the committee, we talked about keeping it as is and improving it there versus realignment, right? And we had a lot of conversations about that. Obviously, cost will come into play at some point. I think one of the early things we got was that the improvements that would need to be done to keep it where it is could be more expensive than realigning it. I don't know. We don't know. We'll figure that out down the road. But to me, it's like I think there's a preference for the realignment from the committee, from all the conversations we had early, but it doesn't necessarily mean that will be hard and fast, absolutely has to happen, right? Once you get more information, if the preference doesn't make sense for logistical reasons or financial reasons, then you go back to the other way.
Right,
Yeah.
if you have to make a feasible road that stays where it is, and it creates overpasses and underpasses and divides the community in 4 quadrants, we haven't done,
That's not good.
that's why we went down a particular path, and you have to try to look at a community that creates community.
And some of the traffic that curves would have and roundabouts would have versus a straight
massive bit. So when we step back and revisit it, and then we have to reteach the planning commission, we're gonna have to reteach the city council, we're gonna have to re-educate before we go that it's not just a black line that we're, oh, well, we wanted to change it, make the black line go over here because it looked prettier. No, there's, you know, costs, not just financially, but to the community. One.
Let's take your comment.
Is everything that they just described written out? Because that's something I missed a big chunk of the transportation meetings when I was out of town. So that just clarified a lot for me as far as why taking out, like slowing traffic down and making it more neighborhood feel that I missed because Patch wasn't here.
Yeah.
Is that spelled out?
Yeah, it'll be in the concept plan report that we're just on the threshold of starting to write. So the rationale for the realignment will be written out.
So, while we're here, is it time to ask what the next steps are and what the end product will look like? So
Yeah.
It is time.
She
wants to tap out.
Yeah, let me just check in before we do that. That's actually a great transition to our concluding part of the meeting. Was there a question, was that you over, yeah.
That X on the map where it shows the Elwood P, one of the things I've always kind of wondered is how come we never looked at shifting kind of that intersection, if we were gonna put a roundabout in there, moving it up to the northwest just slightly, you know, where the park's proposed to go. In plan. Oh, you know, instead of going,
The other way.
because we're shifting it, we're going all the way across the creek, right? So we're not just doing, we all know there's like huge drop offs to the left, you know, if you're like going to lower north, we're having crossing. Why don't we ever look at shifting it up into the north just where it's flat? Were you on 6 months ago? I was here. We were never presented with that option.
and now we all know a lot more, don't we?
Yeah. This is my first say stuff.
We'll look at it here.
We all see it.
I think we're.
So I think the idea was to
There's a bunch of houses to be part of the problem.
Go this way and then
cross this
where the
way.
park, I'm sorry, to the northeast. To the northeast.
Yeah.
So
Stay on this side of the creek.
and just have one creek crossing there.
I think the problem though is right where the intersection is in the dip. And one of the reasons you have to realign is to get out of the dip.
Right.
So you'd have to, you couldn't just go to the north because you'd still end up in the dip. That's why. Yeah, you'd have to cut through 20 houses.
That is the reason. It's the dip, it's the constructability issues with the dip, and the costs that go along with them. Part of the constructability issues are you have to keep traffic flowing while you build it. And not impossible to solve, but that was part of the thinking that led to the realignment.
And that was the first issue. This issue came up back in 2017 when we talked about it. It was the same issue, and it was the cost issue and the constructability issues. And then the ecological impact as well.
What would you doing it twice though?
Well, the thing is, something has to be done either way. So either you have to realign or you have to build that dip up 15 feet into the air. That's what you have to do.
Okay, so I think we're to next steps. Erica, why don't you kick us off with next steps?
Sure. So the next steps, we're going to come back to you here within the next month. We're looking at a meeting as quick as we can towards the end of February. I think we have a tentative date of the 23rd.
Something like that.
Yeah, I'll work on that and then send you a tentative email invite like I typically do. And then we're going to focus that meeting on infrastructure and a funding strategy for that meeting. That will be the purpose of that meeting, and kind of ultimately looking at our final map that we just created this evening. And then we're going to bring to you a outline of what the plan will look like, Jean, and the chapters and how everything will lay out. So we'll have that, and we hope to really really finish up this concept plan within the next couple of months. We're only looking at 2 more meetings with this group. And then once it's finalized, we will start a process with our planning commission and city council. But this group will be making a recommendation to our planning commission.
A finished product, the city's website has a concept plan for like the top employment area. If someone wanted to look and see what a final concept plan that was adopted through the top employment plan has what it is, and there's kind of get a look and feel of what it looks like.
And this will probably be not quite as detailed as that.
Right, because this is a preliminary.
Well, this will be a concept plan in the same definition as that one was done, but they simply had just more resources and more time on producing the product.
And it was a very clear vision of employment land, and it was a smaller scale.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but it still gives you chapter and verse of what it's going to include.
Yep.
See it.
Yeah.
And I
What
mean,
are the goals? What are the land uses? What's the transportation? What's the natural resource protection? How does it all create community?
And that's what a concept plan consists of.
Right.
Goals. And transportation.
Yeah.
For people who've never seen one before, it's nice to look at what someone else's homework looks like before you have to do your own.
And I mean, I think the preliminary concept plan, the earlier version, also gives a pretty good sense of what that would look like too.
Okay. Any last questions on next steps? Erica, you want to do dates later, right? You want to do it over email?
I will send out a date to the group early next week so everyone can get it on their calendar. But
Erica, it's Brian Fairbanks. I want to just tell you that I can tell you that at least 2 of your members will not be available on the 23rd. Sherwood, the chamber has their dinner that night. Just letting you know. And that would pull me, and it would pull Tim Rosner out. I can't speak for anybody else. I'm kind of speaking for him, but I couldn't imagine he wouldn't be there.
that's great information to know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. First week of March then is looking better. Okay, anything from members? Go to the order here. All right, we're adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
And early
Nice
stuff?
working with you.
What's your first big plan to get over retirement?
Oh, it's a little bit more stuff around the house, you know.